As you are making your way from your last break, have you had a good weekend? Good. Good. You can go ahead and cheer now, but I am going to send out a little survey so you can be honest on that. But I have had a great weekend. I have loved.
Fantastic weekend.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
And it's just amazing how you put in a little bit of work and God's like, oh, that's cute. Let me show you what I can do, right? And he just shows out every time and shows up. And I'm so thrilled to be here. I'm thrilled to be here with Rhonda. This is Rhonda Zorn Fernandez. Yeah. And she has a fan club on the second row, apparently.
Munford.
Yeah, I was trying.
Represents.
I was trying to remember how I actually met Rhonda, and it was. Here's the very short story. Rhonda was. She was in Florida, and I had brought my chorus down for spring break, and they were going to sing at your congregation, and they did. And after they sang that, it was a Sunday night. Then all of these people were gathered around what I assumed to be a newborn, as you do, And so I was like, and I love a baby. And so I was like, I'll mosey over there and see the newborn too. And it wasn't, it was Rhonda. It was just like really bubbly, outgoing, and like people just gravitate to you, and I love that about you, and I know why now, just because you're just light and life and all things good. And so, but I don't think a lot of people know the story of your parents, and I want you to start off sharing your story, if you will, things that help build your faith and your trust in God with you personally.
Well, I've gone back and forth on a couple of things that have helped me build my faith. And last night, I don't know if I woke you up, Gail, but I was tossing and turning a little bit, and I decided to talk about something that I've never talked about in public before, and something that's traumatic in my life. And but it was a huge faith builder for me. I'm married to Halo Fernandez. His parents are from Cuba, and Castro took their home away, and so they fled to the United States and became citizens here and then started their family. My husband's a Chattanooga man. We've been married for a long time, and he pulls off his name. Not many people can pull off the name Halo. But I was married once before, and I wanted to share a little bit of that with you in hopes that it might help someone. I was married for a decade and am divorced from that first husband for scriptural reasons, and just wanted to share a little bit about that. I met this wonderful young man when I was a senior in high school. We dated on and off through college, and we married after I graduated from college and had some really good times. Our parents were very good friends. We vacationed together, the six of us, quite often. And it all started when we were in Rochester, Minnesota. He was very, very busy in his medical practice at the Mayo Clinic and saw all sorts of really unusual cases. You don't go to the Mayo Clinic just for checkups. Usually you go when you need answers for complicated things. And he was stayed very stressed and at the Mayo Clinic at his job. And I kept trying to encourage him to get a hobby and get something to decompress, because he just worked all the time, and I could tell some things were off with him. And he said, well, your dad, he doesn't fish, he doesn't do sports, your dad doesn't have a hobby, so why do I have to have a hobby? And I said, well, that's different, it's church work. But I was always trying to get him to do something because all he did was work. Well, he ended up getting, he came home one night and said, we need to talk. I talked to a couple of my friends that were in a research group with him. And he said, when your father baptized me, I just need to tell you that it didn't feel the way when I got baptized. I didn't feel the way that I think you felt when you got baptized. I said, what do you mean? And he said, I felt like, well, number one, I knew that you wouldn't marry me if I wasn't a member of the church. And so I was sort of wanting this to work, but it has felt fake all along. And keep in mind, this is someone that a month earlier had preached. And we co-taught a Sunday school class. We raised money for this little church. Shout out to Brenda Johnson, my aunt, Uncle Roy, and Aunt Brenda kept the light bills paid at that church for us there for a while. And it was hard to believe that he felt like he was an imposter in his faith. And he said, I'm just going to take a break from the spiritual things, try to figure out about God's existence. And my head is spinning. Y'all, it's not just youth that need to be careful who you associate with. Hanging out with people that think they're smarter than the Almighty God is dangerous. And that is not who you go to with your problems to talk about things, because you're not going to get the right answers. And things just, he did end up getting a hobby. It was nurses. I should have been specific. I was thinking racquetball. But, but the fact I could even make a joke about it now says a lot. But we got over that, we got through that one, and it happened a bunch of times later. And finally, my counselor, who was a Christian counselor, finally told me, why are you staying in the marriage? And I said, number one, I still love him. I can't imagine life without him. Number two, I don't want to be the first person on either side of our family in the history of our records to get a divorce, to be a failure at the second biggest thing you do. And third, I think if we divorce, I don't think he'll ever come back to the church. And the thought of him being lost, I mean, we talk a lot about heaven and look forward to heaven, but hell is real too. And the thought of him being lost, I was just torn up inside. And he said, Rhonda, that is not your job. The Rhonda Zorn that I know has enough self-worth to know when to call it. And that's not your job to hold him to his faith. And he said, if you stay in the marriage much longer, he might get the signal that you're just going along with an open marriage. And you could have just knocked me over when he said that. And I picked up my purse and I said, I'm going to sign papers. I did not realize that was where this was. And when I got to the door, I was telling JJ about this earlier. When I got to the door, I looked back at the counselor and he said, always trust in God. Do not lean on your own understanding. And so I moved forward, thank you, and that night I went to my church, used my church key, got in, and the light was on over the baptistry. Somebody had not turned it off. And I had a talk with God. I cried, I prayed, I was angry. In the middle of it, I got thankful and happy for the good part of our marriage, because we're all a combination of good, bad, and indifferent, and that's who creates who we are. Somebody's not just evil forever because of this one thing. There's other parts to it too. And I don't know, JJ, you would probably know this. I'm not a germaphobe, but I am neat and tidy enough to know that I must have have lost my mind, because I was on my stomach on that 30-year-old gross carpet with my face planted on the carpet, just crying and praying. And I mean, you're just not even thinking. I don't know. I mean, how do you know how to divorce correctly? I mean, you've just about lost your mind over it.
I think that's called grief.
There you go.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what, I don't know if this makes sense to anybody else. Of course, we know that we answer to God, and we know that Jesus is crazy about us, and I understand all that. But in my mind, I answer to my father, my Jack Zorn father, and then God, and then you get married, and your husband is the spiritual leader of the family. And so, you answer to God, of course, but you've got this man that you're answering to, and all of a sudden, my parents are grieving because my ex-husband did go to my parents and his parents together in a group and told them everything. And so they were grieving just from that. And so all of a sudden, it was just me and God. And that was the way it was supposed to be anyway. And I was just laying there on the floor and just thinking, I was way too comfortable with the other arrangement. And this felt real. And it was so strange that something so traumatic to me actually grew my faith in a way that I had never had my faith grown before. And parts of that I've benefited from even today came out of that trauma. And I just want anybody here that may be going through something very, very, very traumatic to know that when I was laying there on that dirty carpet that finally got replaced, I felt like I was looking through a tunnel, and I sort of felt like, okay, it's either going to be a train coming at me and I'm on the track, or it's going to be the light of the Lord pulling me through that tunnel to the other side and having me in the palm of his hand. And praise God that that's the direction I went. And please be there for people that are going through things like that and help them to just pull toward God and know that God's got this, as hurtful as it is. God does not promise us a marriage, children, a home, to get to live in a great country like this. Doesn't promise us mental health, physical health. God promises us the opportunity to go to heaven, to do the things that we all know to do, that to go to heaven, to get baptized, to live in the light. That's something that nobody can ever take away from you. Not a hurt relationship of any kind, and not all relationships are even meant to be continued. And I think that's something we need to think about sometimes too. We just think that we're a failure if we can't get it fixed, and sometimes it just doesn't need to be fixed. We just need to move on. But it really helped grow my faith, and that wasn't a happy, good feeling family type story, but just wanted to share it.
But it's real. It's real. And I feel like you probably wouldn't be the person you are or have the faith and the trust in God that you have now had you not gone through that.
I believe that.
And so when James talks about counting it all joy when you go through that, it's hard in that moment to be joyful. We're grieving, we're hurting, but we know that there's a purpose for this. And you're going to come out on the other side, and you're going to grow from it, and you're going to be a better person and help other people. I mean, how many people can be helped and encouraged by knowing your story? You mentioned your parents, and I do want to talk about your parents.
Yes.
Because I don't think a lot of people know the story of the origin of Lads to Leaders, and I know that they didn't have an easy time in the beginning. So tell us about that.
Well, I'll start a little bit with their background and then move it into Lads. My parents both came from farming families. My mother grew up in the Talladega National Forest, where Uncle Roy and Aunt Brenda still live now. And they didn't have a lot growing up, but they had a home and always had things to eat. And my father grew up all kinds of poor. I don't know how you could be more poor, on the Alabama-Florida line. And he grew up sharing a room with 3 sisters, and there was a hole in the tin roof in one corner of the room, and that it could rain in if the wind hit it just right. And Dad remembered, I learned all kinds of stuff during the later years. When someone's homebound later, they end up talking about things, all kinds of things. But he said that he looked up at the stars and just wondered who was in charge of the stars as a little boy, through a hole in the tin roof. And that just always just really pricked my heart. But he had a really, really hard childhood. His father was a raging alcoholic. And when I say raging, I mean a cursing alcoholic. And not a good person. And one little brief story, his dad made him quit school in the 10th grade. Dad had a real bad stutter and didn't do well academically because he worked so hard on the farm. And his father made him quit school in the 10th grade to work longer hours on the farm. But he did give Dad this small little portion of land that he could grow something for himself. So he grew cotton and sugar cane, and he got everything harvested. He was very proud that he had all of his things harvested. He was about to go sell it. And his dad said, just wait and do it tomorrow. It's late. So Dad got up the next morning to go take his crops to be sold to make his own money. And his father had taken it the night before and sold it and went on a several-week drinking binge with his money. So that's the type relationship that he had with his dad. So very sad, very unfortunate type relationship. But he left home not long after that and worked in the orange orchards, and then he went to work for a concrete plant. And he would send money back home to his twin, and he's got a twin sister, and his other sisters and his mom. He would send money back because he knew that the income from his dad was not very dependable. So at this concrete plant, the Lord provided the right job at this concrete plant. Oh, side note to that, Dad didn't have gloves. And so at the concrete plant, they mixed it with some kind of chemicals, how people put their hands all in that stuff. We know better now. And so, but he's on a couple of fingers, Dad has incomplete fingerprints. He doesn't have the whole fingerprint. So he always said if preaching didn't work out, he could go into crime because he couldn't do his fingerprints. Which I always thought was pretty funny. Preaching, crime, you know. So anyway, so he was at the concrete plant working real hard, and the owner of the concrete plant was an elder and asked all the workers to come to the gospel meeting at the Mount Dora Church of Christ. And so I know Mount Dora school is here. So nobody wanted to go, and the next day he came back and said, okay, anybody that wants to come, you don't have to clock out. You can just be on the clock. Dad said, what's the address? So Dad goes, and every night of the gospel meeting, he is just taken by the message, taking notes, asking questions. The last night of the gospel meeting, Daddy got baptized. And I mean, when he got baptized, he got baptized. He was on fire. He wanted to go convert the rest of his family, which he eventually did, including his father, with the exception of one sister. And he wanted to know how to convert other people. He was passionate and just had such a heart, a grateful heart for being saved, for having heaven, for having the opportunity to become a Christian. So these people that judge me for giving away Pizza Hut coupons when a kid finishes their centurion scripture, just remember Daddy got baptized on the clock. He was being paid. Whatever you got to do. He was just on fire. So these men at church heard about him, very ill prepared academically, and he knew, I need to learn. I need to know the principles. I need to know what it is I'm teaching.
Because not growing up with anything, he didn't have basics, right?
No, he did not have basics. He did not have basics. And so he was like really starting at the very beginning. And so the Sunday school teacher at this little church said, okay, we're all, next week you take this question, and you take this question, you take this question. Well, the next week, he had every single day, he had gone to all the preachers and anybody he could find all around with all of his waking hours that he wasn't working, researching this one question. When he got back in class and he filled the entire class on this amazing overkill of one question. And they were like, oh, okay, he needs to get an education. And he said, I want to be a preacher. I want to I want other people to have the opportunity that I had. Plus, keep in mind, this is someone that needed a mentor his whole life, that needed help, that needed guidance, and he wanted to help other people because he was now in a good situation. So that was really interesting. And so this man told him, okay, here's the name of a man. His name is Rex Turner. I want you to find a way to get to Alabama Christian College, which is Faulkner University now. And if you can get there, this man will help you. Okay, in overalls, no money, 10th grade education. Did I mention his grades weren't even good up to 10th grade? And he rode his horse. He made his first dollar, by the way, breaking a wild horse that nobody else could break. So he was quite the little farm cowboy. And but he really, really wanted to preach. And so he has no money, very little education, overalls, trusted God enough to get himself to Alabama Christian / Faulkner, and to know that good things were going to happen when he got there. You know, I don't know that I might not think I'm about to really embarrass myself. Right. I mean, you know, they don't know me. I don't present well. You know, I just, right. But he got there, And I love all the Christian universities that we have, but I will always have a soft spot in my heart for Faulkner for taking a chance on him. I don't even know how you do that. I don't know how you get enrolled in all that with just the lack of preparedness. But they worked with him, and y'all, the day he got to that campus, he met my mother, and so she was in the first admissions part, and she got to go to college because of my Uncle Blois talking her parents into it, and so they met that very first day. And he got schooling there. He got his high school degree. He got a couple of other degrees from Faulkner, and then went on later to get a couple of degrees at other Christian universities and even his pilot's license. But he knew that he was a lifelong education person. I mean, he was just in school, here, there, and everywhere. But he knew he needed to know. If he's going to get up and preach, he needed to know what he was preaching about, and he needed to be able to answer questions. So I just thought that was a really cool story. And while they were at Faulkner, about the time they got engaged and married, my grandmother, Meemaw, got pregnant. She thought she was in menopause. She got pregnant. She was like, whoa, with my Uncle Roy. So Mom was already in college by the time Meemaw and Papa had Uncle Roy.
Learning all kinds of stuff tonight.
Then Uncle Roy married somebody younger, so that's why Aunt Brenda and I are the same age. People just go, y'all are the same age. I'm like, we're from Alabama. So.
That's all you need to say. That's hilarious.
But there's quite the age gap. But he got his start with his education, and then we moved around a couple of states. And he started some churches and worked with some churches. He started the church in Donaldsonville, Georgia, and he started
So he was a preacher at this point.
Yes, he was a preacher at this point. And he started a church in Louisiana, in the New Orleans area on the West Bank. And that I did not do well with that one. I did not do well, I'll be honest with you, getting dropped into the public school system in New Orleans. That's a time period that I'd like to not think about, but I wouldn't recommend it. But that was tough. That was tough. But
that's his education and married, and I guess you and
yes,
Risa
yes,
was
yes.
in the picture as well.
Three of us girls. We're going with him.
Okay.
And
so how did Lads to Leaders come into this?
Okay, Lads to Leaders got started when he started working at Warner Robins, Georgia. Cool place. We drive by it anytime we're in the area, and I take a picture. And Dad was preaching there. He's a pulpit minister. And part of the reason why they hired him, I talked to Larry Lane about this the other day, was they had heard that he worked really well with youth, and he had a passion for youth. And he was very into mentoring youth because he needed a mentor, and he knew what that felt like. So he was their pulpit minister. And this was in the 60s when young people were all over the news for not such nice things. And there was a lot of protest. There was an Air Force base. There's a lot of protests going on for the Vietnam War. And there was a bunch of young people that were down by some body of water that were not properly clad. The women were naked from the waist up. And they were doing all of this weird stuff. And it was just a time when there was just young people were acting out. And the elders talked to Dad, and they said, there's a young boy in our youth group that knows how to speak, and the others want to learn how, and we need to save our youth. All our youth at our church is not like the youth that you're seeing on television. So we need you to come up with something that can help our youth, develop something. So Dad comes home, and they've told me this story several times in the last decade of their life. He comes home and he talks to my mom, and he said, I'm not going to be spending much time with the family here for just a little bit. I need to spend a lot of time in prayer, a lot of time in meditation, and I've been given the task. Now, this is the way that Daddy thinks. At this point, he's a big thinker. He's not the farm boy anymore. He's like, they have asked me to come up with a plan, a program to save the youth of this country. Well, the elder said, our youth group, but somehow when he's talking to Mom, it's like, one time it was like to save the youth of the church, And then the next time he's talking to save the youth of the nation, he's just like, he's projecting. So, and he didn't take regular meals. And so that was the only time in my life I ever heard of my dad fasting, because he loved his food. But he was doing some fasting and just intense praying and then listening to God. And he just came up with this idea about Lads to Leaders. And he prayed for God to give him something he could do with his skill set, that he could do not for a day, not for a week, not for a year, but for his lifetime, to save young people, to grow the church with young people, to help the young people that are in the church be retained, and to grow giants out of the youth. And he said, this is what God wants me to do with my life. So if you ever find a ministry that you feel like this is what God wants me to do with my life, then you have hit the gold button, and you just go, girl, because that's part of why Dad could not be stopped with the program. Because if he gotten all kinds of people tried to stop it, tried to take it, tried to whatever, all the, how that goes. But he felt like God's hand is in this program. And he used to say, if we can keep it out of the ditches, not go too left, not go too right, where the most amount of youth can participate in this, we can grow the church, we can grow leaders, grow young leaders. And so he just felt so compelled that that was what he was supposed to do with his life. So he got his first group together, and he did these flannel boards. Mama made them, and he did America spelled here, the right America, the wrong America over here. Over here, A would be anarchy. He would, or abortion. The good and the bad. And it's different back then. He could get into high schools. He could get into the weirdest places. And Lonnie Jones was talking about this recently. When he was talking about being in some politician's office, and he said, I don't know how in the world, Dad, your dad got me in there. But it was interesting. But he would go and he would do these presentations to high schools and to student bodies. And at one point, he had a black student on his team, and he was invited back, but was asked not to bring that particular student. And so, when the person called Dad, he said, so we just want these students. Do you understand what I'm saying? And Dad said, I got it. I got exactly what you're saying. So Dad came back the next time with this group, and Dad would make you feel like $1 million if you're on his speaker team. So there was rows right down there on the front, and Dad was really pleased. I didn't know this story until probably 2 years before he passed. He was very proud of himself for pulling this off. He comes in, he sits down here, and right as the speaker team is coming up on stage, on the side right over here, he pushes open the emergency door where he brought 3 black young men this time. Mm-hmm. And they go right up on stage, and only one of them spoke, but he just wanted the other 2 for good measure, I guess. But what are you going to say when you're already up there? And so he was just that kind of person. He didn't like get in a big argument with you, but he just tried to always do the right thing.
Right.
And it was pretty cool. He had his Lads to Leaders speak at the Jimmy Carter prayer breakfast. He had one of his Lads to Leaders quote the entire Sermon on the Mount on the floor of the Georgia legislature. He believed in your civic duty. He always keep God first. Of course, that was never even a question, but you can be civically involved and do your part and still keep your priorities right and know who God is and who you serve. And that was just the way that he felt about it. He wanted to grow leaders in the church and in the community.
So was this during the infamous school bus days?
Yes. This was.
So talk a little bit about that.
Yes, it was not a good time. Not a good time to be in the South, that's for sure. My sister remembers more about it than I do. But there was a lot of stress and a lot of strife to keep things separate. And Dad just had a way around it without causing a lot of conflict. And it was a blessing that he was just able to do it without just causing a bunch of conflict. But he was very determined. He was very, very determined to make everybody feel equally loved. And he went out of his way to do that.
Y'all were going all over the country, is that
Yes,
right?
we were going a lot of different places, and that was one of the things that caused the financial hardship for our family. My poor mama, she did it willingly. It wasn't just fulfilling Dad's dream. This was Mama's dream too. She was smart, and she worked 3 jobs, sometimes 4 jobs. She drove a school bus. I am connected to my britches.
Oh,
Okay,
that happens.
sorry. Okay, she drove a school bus. She worked full-time at Bell South during the day. Tuesday and Thursday night, she did payroll at Kmart, which I love that gig because they had a blue light special, and she got to bring home all the Subway sandwiches that didn't sell. So we were like, whoop, Subway. So we knew we had something good that night. So she always worked for lads, and she just worked. I don't know 2 people that worked harder than my parents and served people more than my parents. I know people that did as much, and everybody loves their parents, and I know I'm not but they just worked. They worked so hard. But most of our family resources went to growing lads to leaders. It wasn't for our home. Right. And so I'll have to admit, we had our water turned off. Dad didn't have gas money many times. We had slim pickings for food a lot of times and made creative things. But my parents tried everything they possibly could to keep adult problems with adults. And we didn't always know there was these problems. But I do remember at the Oakwild house, the water getting turned off, and Dad was like, Rhonda, let's have a life lesson. This is how you turn it on with a crowbar. We go out to the street. It was sort of like keepers and providers. We're going to learn something.
Yeah.
And we're
Well, they couldn't have fingerprinted him, so,
And so, so it was, he knew how to turn it back on. So, and of course, we got the bill paid, but they had a lot of financial problems because it costs a lot of money to travel around when you're paying. I mean, it's like a habitual vacation. You're just going to churches. And the material, and, it was back before there was the support and the growth and, getting it going. And, of course, it took traction and got much better in time and had the first convention on Faulkner's campus in front of the rotunda and just grew and just turned lucky for me. They added girls while I was still young enough, and one of the highlights of my entire life was running up on stage and Daddy, it wasn't the trophy that I won because it was Daddy making me feel like his trophy. He picked me up and spun me around, and I've got this classic picture, me up in the air, and he was stronger and I was smaller. And he made me feel like I was his trophy. And he before I left stage, he leaned down and he said, as long as you do your best, you've always won. And that's the way that I felt, and that was the way he felt. And it's fun to do some competition sometimes, but you do your best and you've won. And so I was so blessed that girls got added. On that note, Mom and myself and Philip Hines from Hartselle, we all 3 were adamant in this room at that convention at Opryland not to add girls. And Philip said, Jack, don't do it. It's going to take the program down. They're going to accuse you of trying to grow women preachers. And I said, Daddy, I agree with Philip. And Mama said, I don't have a good feeling about it, Jack. We don't need to add girls. And Dad said, I take all this under advisement. I'm going to pray about it. 15 minutes later, he got up on stage and announced we were adding girls. And so I'm attached again. I'm taking this bracelet off.
Well,
and so I'm glad he did. I had that one wrong.
I'm glad he did as well. And I have heard my favorite story I think I've heard in the last decade is the one you told me at Lads to Leaders about you when y'all were traveling around. And you have to tell it because when I am having a bad day, I literally think about this story. And it gets rid of all the intrusive thoughts.
Okay. You talking about the camper?
I'm talking about the truck stop.
Truck stop?
Yes.
Oh, truck stop. Okay. We had this camper. It was no Airstream, I'll tell you. It was this camper that somebody probably gave Dad for close to nothing. But he could carry a bunch of kids in it and go church to church and pile out and everybody speak and everything. And so we had this camper, and of course it had Lads to Leaders logo on the side of it. So you would stop and people would want to talk to you. What is that? You know, and we didn't have vacations much growing up. Our only vacation I really remember, besides workshops, was one to North Carolina where Dad lost a watermelon in the stream and was trying to catch it or something. But we got moccasins and turquoise rings at some Indian reservation, and that was our vacation. But we were in this camper. So we pull up at a truck stop. Oh, we were going state to state. We wanted to see how many states we could go to. So we'd stop at the state sign and all pile out and get our picture taken under Illinois, and then we'd go to like the next exit and turn and go to the next. It's like, what did we see? But we were like trying to like this. If you're so close to another state, anyway, we pulled up at this truck stop, and I was working on a speech, and this was before girls. This was before girls were in Lads Leaders. This was 4-H. And I was working on my speech, and we had this contest that I wanted to speak in all these different states. So when we were in the state, I would practice my speech to Mom in the camper and check that off. Well, we pull up to this truck stop, and I hop out, and I go in. I guess my parents think I'm going to the restroom. And so there was all these people that they had a restaurant in the truck stop. So I go up to this table, and I said, "Hi, my name's Rhonda Zorn," and I'm sure they can give a rip. And so I'm making their food cold, and I said, "Can I give a speech to you that I'm working on? It's real important to me. Can I give you this speech?" And they're like, "Yeah." And so, so there I go into my speech, and I can remember at one point they just started eating. They were like listening to me, but I wanted to practice my speech with somebody besides my family.
5 to 8 minutes, you know.
and I don't remember what the speech was about, but I remember telling you that I can't believe my parents really let me do that.
And I said, your mom was probably behind you going, "I'm so sorry." Just imagine all these truckers sitting at a table, and this little girl pops up, "Hey, I'm Rhonda Zorn. Can I give you a speech?" And you're just like, you're stuck because your food's there.
They probably thought I was selling something, but I was not.
It's the most Rhonda Zorn story I've ever heard. That so defines how you are. And I do want to talk about the last part of their life, because you and Halo took them in, and y'all cared for them for the last decade of their life.
Dad lived with us the last couple of years, I guess it was, but the last decade of Mom and Dad's life, we needed to help them at varying levels. Dad had his first TIA when I was a junior in college. So, he had to watch with the strokes. He got his first hearing aid in his 40s, and of course he went blind. So, and then you've got Mom with the beginning part of Alzheimer's. And so I added up the other day. I didn't realize it was this long. If you need, well, I don't need to say this. I probably need to write a book on elder care, but I know a lot of tricks. We had hospice, cumulatively, one or both were in hospice a total of 3 years and 4 months. It's not intended to be a long-term thing, but if I had known they were going to be sick for that long, I would have bit the bullet and just moved them to Florida. But at one point, we were going to move them to Florida, and I went to the Helen Keller School for the Blind and Deaf. That was another reason why they lived where they lived. That helped me with Dad. And one of the head honchos of that school said, "Rhonda, you're here to get his records. You're considering moving him." I said, "We're considering it." He said, "Your dad is such a type A personality, such a go-getter, such a driven person, even without sight. If you move him to Florida and move him into a home that he does not know have memory of what it looks like, he will go down. You will not have him long." He had his vision when he moved into that house in Silicaga. So even though he lost his vision, he can feel the shade from the pear tree that he planted.
Right.
He knows he knows when he hits that little bump in the driveway in the wheelchair. If he does his hand like this, he can touch the mailbox. And I got to thinking about it. If you live in a place that you've never seen, I don't know, that probably would mess with you mentally. So we tried very, very hard to keep them in their home as long as possible. Not that there's anything wrong with nursing homes, but people want to stay in their own home. So the biggest gift that my husband ever gave me, ever, and it's hard to even say it without crying, is, I'll tell you, Cubans, that culture takes care of their people. And he didn't even get to meet his grandparents because they waited too late to flee, and then they wouldn't let him go. But the guilt-free, totally guilt-free permission, not only permission at times, insistence that we do everything that we could reasonably for my parents, was a huge gift. Because there were 2 years in particular that I was in Sylacauga more days on the calendar than I was at home. And I love my husband. I was not trying to escape home. And my job situation changed. Then it went to no job. And then when I was home, I was watching everything with cameras. And at one point we had 7 locks on the inside of the kitchen door, so that by the time Mom got them all unlocked, it would have made enough racket for the caregiver to get in there to keep her from going walking around. And so we were very proud that they got to stay home, and very proud that they had some difficult times, but they didn't suffer. Outside of a few times when some things would happen with Dad's catheter and things like that, there wasn't a lot of suffering, so they still had something to offer. He converted his RN. We thought he was going to drown when he wanted to participate in the baptism, because he was in no shape to participate in the baptism. But he converted his RN, and it was a requirement with all his caregivers that they read the Bible to him each day. And he would try to pay attention to them and pick out what he thought they needed, and then what he needed as well. And one of my favorite memories of Halo, he would not want, don't tell him I'm telling you this, but but he would read the Bible. This was after that he moved to our house. Halo would read the Bible to him sometimes a couple of hours a day, and they started in Genesis. Let's read through the Bible. And so Halo said, "Oh, we're gonna finish today. We're gonna finish, the first time we go through the Bible today." So he was excited. So he goes in there, and he gets to the last verse, and he pauses and he closes the Bible, and he says, "Dr. Zorn, we just read the Bible." And he was about to set up a schedule for some things that he wanted to study next. And then Dad said, "Next." And Halo said, "Excuse me?" And he said, "Start over." And so he had Halo just start over with Genesis. And Halo was like, "For 30 minutes, can we say, we just read the Bible?" It was just like, Daddy was just like, he didn't want it to stop.
And what a beautiful story in your parents not losing trust in God.
Yes.
Having that all the way through the end.
All the way. And he just very, very much was looking forward to heaven. But he just felt up until the week, maybe a month before he actually died, he said, "Rhonda, get my clipboard." Well, I'm like, okay, we don't do clipboards anymore. But I just, he was blind, so he didn't know I didn't get it. So I came in there with a spiral notebook. And I said, "What can I write down for you, Daddy?" And he said, "I've got 10 names in my mind. I want you to write them down, and we're going to call and encourage them." And that's just, here he is, been in adult diapers 4 years now, almost deaf, blind, bedridden. We just couldn't get him up. We just were turning him at that point. And he's wanting to encourage other people. And I think that's why he lived as long as he did, because he really felt like he still had something to offer. And he enjoyed his time in the Word. And it just killed him not to be able to go to church. Oh my goodness, it just killed him. And he would say, one time we had a caregiver that stayed with him, and he said, "Okay, so what's the system?" I put the laptop on the tray where he would eat, fold it open, and I said, "This is what you do." He does Justin Rogers last. He does I can't remember what preachers, I think, anyway, I'm drawing a blank, but he did Justin last. He did 3 sermons. And by the time he went through 3 church services, we'd be home. So he would know we'd be home from church, but do the communion with just the first one. Phil Sanders was the first one. Jeff Jenkins, I think, the second. Anyway, he was going through those 3, and before Justin got finished, they'd probably be home. And so I thought that was a good plan. Mm-hmm. And so then Dad said, okay, so you paid somebody to come here and not worship at their church so you and Halo can go to worship. And I'm like, whoa, I never even thought about that. And he said, I'd love to have church with my family. And so we said, we will pay you for today and you can go now. So your lucky day. And we stayed and had church with him. And he said, I just missed the body. I just missed the church. And that was, that just made him really sad. Yeah. But I'll tell you one funny story. I know we're about done. But when Mom and Dad were both, Dad loves the steak like Lily does in our Munford group. And so we went to, we were getting ready. I was getting them to go to this place in Childersburg that had good steaks. So I got Dad in the car. I got Mom in the car first. She had a walker. And then I put her walker in the back of the car. And then I go around the other side with Dad. Dad was in a wheelchair and got him in the car. And I was struggling with him because I kept saying, I'm trying to get your belt. Well, he started taking his belt off, and I meant the seat belt. So we were going back and forth. He was confused on what I was saying for a minute. So I put the wheelchair in the back, and then I come around to get in the car, and I realized Mama's gone. So I'm like, where'd she go? And she not supposed to do those 2 stairs by herself. So the walker was right there. So she had gone in the house. And I go in, and there are 2 hospital beds together in their room, and I'll grab bars and all this stuff, had it all set up. She was laying in the bed with her shoes on, with her purse on her stomach, just laying there. And I'm like, Mama, we're going to eat. She said, okay, let me get my purse. So she just got her purse up and comes back out. And so get her back in the car. I get in the car, and then Dad said, I think I need to use the restroom in my own bathroom. So I'm like, okay. So I get Dad out and get the wheelchair, go up the ramp we had built, and take him in and change him and all that stuff. And then I come back around to the den, and he's sitting there in the wheelchair. And so I go back out to tell Mom, something. And I don't know, I was doing something for a minute. So then she comes back in. When I open the door, I'll be right there, Mom. She comes back in the kitchen. She comes back into where Dad is, and I'm looking for something. I don't know what it was. And Mama goes, oh, my goodness, I'm so full I couldn't eat anything else. And I said, what? And she said, I just ate too much. I can't eat anything else. That was so fun. And Dad said, what is going on around here? What is going on? And I said, oh, goodness, Daddy, I don't know. And he said, get me some Vienna sausage and some of those crackers, those fancy crackers, Ritz crackers, and let's just call it a night. And I just thought, I was like, boy, I saved all this money, all this energy, and we're just going round and around. And Mom just got confused. She thought we'd already gone, bless her heart. And Dad was like, what happened to my steak? But it was just, it's just, it was, all that caregiving stuff is so hard. You got to just really enjoy the fun moment parts. And funny stuff happened.
Yeah. Well, as far as your parents go, I don't know how many thousands of people have been influenced and impacted with the program that they started and they sacrificed. I mean, basically their life for encouraging. And your dad's such a great example of walking in the light and doing what he was called to do, even if he didn't feel qualified, because God does not call the qualified, he qualifies the called.
Amen.
And I feel like it's just such a beautiful thing when I hear people say, oh, this is what really solidified my faith when I was studying for this, for Lads to Leaders. And such a wonderful memory of him being up on that stage and, having pictures with my girls, and that being a big part of our life as far as them growing up in that. And I just thought it would be so interesting for y'all to hear the story about the origin of Lads to Leaders, and because I assumed your father grew up in a Christian home and
Nope.
things of that nature. So God can take something and someone that doesn't have a great spiritual background and make something great, because God is good
He is all the time.
and all the time. We're going to thank you so much, Rhonda. I
You're
appreciate
so welcome.
you, friend.
And thank y'all for loving my daddy and my mama.
Yeah.